The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those Knuckleheads of Liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. We're coming at you on January 19th, 2022, and we've actually managed to survive a year of the Biden administration, which, you know, who knew? I wasn't sure, to tell you the truth. But, we still got 3 more years, maybe, unless President Harris decides to step in. But anyways, before we get to any of the topics of our show today, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper left-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And in our upper right-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. My name's Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host today. So this is just kind of a hodgepodge show. We have a few different issues to talk about in this one. But one of the craziest things that, we've been going through is this race obsession that we've been getting from the left on just everything viewed through the lens of race. And so one of the topics that happened last year, and we just didn't have a chance to get to it, was crazy quarterback Colin Kaepernick. He apparently did a Netflix special, and in that Netflix special, it was a sort of a little bit of supposed to be a kind of a bio on his growing up and such, and his journey into the NFL. And if you remember, Colin Kaepernick, he is the quarterback who became famous, not so much for his play on the field, but for taking a knee on the sidelines during the national anthem. And, so we've talked about him a little bit on the show before, but not this Netflix special. And so anyways, everything became about race around him. And so, of course, what else would we expect from the Netflix special? And in the Netflix special, when he gets to talking about the NFL, he and maybe we could get the visual on this one. So he actually compares the NFL draft and combine to essentially slavery, and he equates players being evaluated for a draft where they're going to be selected and paid millions of dollars to play a sport that everybody in the country loves to watch on Sundays. He literally is saying that was the equivalent of slavery. And this is a scene from the actual show. And it literally has these guys who are supposed to be representing like NFL players, and this is supposed to be like the GM or the head coach coming around and checking them out to see if they're the right material. And just one of the things right off the top of my head is there's a fair number of white guys playing in the NFL too.
Yeah, well, I guess they're slaves too. I guess.
Yeah, but just the absurdity. I just can't imagine that anybody takes this stuff seriously. You guys have any thoughts on this lunacy?
This is that so much enter the mind and thinking in our society today. I find this so offensive you wouldn't believe, personally offensive, because I have no connection to American slavery, but I do have connection to slavery outside the United States. And when you think about the horror and suffering that our ancestors went through to get to this point in our lives, in our development, in our journey of liberty, to then have that compared to these athletes, the process, the NFL draft, where athletes are checked out and tested and given $1 million contracts at the end, and also the endorsements that give them the kind of living that many of us will wish for. To have that compared to the suffering and the horror of slavery is beyond lunatic. is beyond any sort of lunacy that you can imagine. And this Colin Kaepernick, who have enjoyed the fruits of the labor of our ancestors, is now comparing his well-being, his success, whatever little success he had in the NFL, he's now comparing that to the slavery that his ancestors suffered through. It's just unimaginable to me. This guy is insane. And Netflix is further insane to be putting this kind of garbage on the television for us to see. This is unbelievable.
I think it's a human trait, because I remember when I was at St. John's Elementary School, a good Catholic boy, and I was lined up to be picked by the two captains of whatever team it was going to be that we were picking teams for. It was kind of a similar thing, they lined us up, and you had to be subjected to the decision making of the captain of the team. So maybe it's a human trait, this whole picking of members of teams or something. I don't know. But anyway, Leon, you said I can't add to that, actually. That unless I'm being silly.
But, just to add to what you're saying, Tim, I mean, the idea of people standing there to be evaluated, that's what everybody does who goes to any kind of a job,
Exactly.
right? I mean, employers don't just close their eyes and say, okay, when I open up, whoever's standing in front of me is going to be my employee. They scrutinize, because it's a risk that they're taking when they hire somebody, and they want to make sure they get a return on it. I don't understand how athletes are being, I guess, put on a pedestal here compared to every other occupation. When I go to a job interview, there might be another 15 people who are competing for that same position, and I've got to go in, tell them about my story and about why they should pick me over all these guys. That's essentially what these guys are doing as athletes. It's just that they speak with their athletics, so that's what has to be measured on the field. So,
and the further, Tim, I'm sorry, did I cut you off, Tim? And the further absurdity about this, even in our personal lives, look at the selection of our wife or our husband. I mean, sure, we don't sit down in our mind and say, well, maybe I should take Jane, I should take that one, I should take the other one, whatever.
Or maybe both.
Or maybe both if you could, right? Maybe both if you could. But the fact of the matter, you go through life, you meet different people, and along the way, you will make a selection as to which one of these persons you want to spend your life with. It's the same process. Right? You just go through the process and you select one person out of whoever it is whoever your population is you're choosing from. And then this idiot have to come along and say this is nothing but slavery. God help us.
You mean to tell us, Leon, that you don't line up the prospective women naked with chains on?
Hey, Leon, if you were paying...
I should have thought about that.
Leon, if you were offering $1 million contracts, I'll bet you there'd be a lot who'd be willing to line up.
Of course.
Hey, we have something from Gloria.
Let's see. I can't. Let's see. When you guys read it,
I would most desire would be the separation of white and black races.
Yeah, she's giving us quotes from Lincoln that are.
Lincoln.
Yeah, there's the other one. Yeah, she sounds like Tom Woods. He's quick to point these little things out about Lincoln.
Well, listen, okay. It is true that you can say that Lincoln did not fight the Civil War, did not prosecute the Civil War to free slavery, to free slaves. He was there. His main goal was to preserve the Union, but the Union ruptured because of slavery. So it was really an indirect attempt at emancipation of the slaves. It was not direct. It is true, and I'm sure if you're going to judge Lincoln in its entirety, if you're going to judge him by today's standards, oh, sure, you probably want to cancel him. Some of these idiots probably want to cancel him. But he was living in his times, and he did what was necessary to be done to end up with the emancipation of Black Americans out of the bondage of slavery. And we should thank him for this. Okay? We really should.
Yeah. Yeah, you're silent, Tim. You're muted.
I was coughing again. I want to thank Gloria for pointing out these little inconsistencies with Lincoln, because they're very true. And but again, Leon brings up the counterpoint that he did a lot to end the whole institution. So anyway, here we are. Now, if you're going to make $1 million, you have to be selected for the team, and you got to line up. And I hope all the future NFL players will be wearing chains while they're lined up in front of the team captain.
Well, if they're going to pay me millions per year and endorsements, I'll take those gold chains.
Me too.
Yeah,
me too.
I'll wear the chains too.
Yeah, I'll wear the chains too. Yeah. I'll probably wear them even as a descendant of slaves. I'll probably wear them.
I'll even put them on my feet too. Matter of fact.
There you go. I mean, the key distinction here is choice, right? And I mean, that's what we're talking about with all these. Now, you can say that maybe it's bad that some kids get funneled towards sports, without maybe getting a good chance at academics, maybe, or something. Maybe the system failed some of these guys along the way. But the bottom line is, these guys who make it to this point, that they're literally being offered $1 million contracts, and it's a choice for them, and they could have stepped down at any point along the way and said, hey, there's something else I'd rather be doing. I'll take the chains of that accounting job. Of being locked to the desk, every day.
Yeah, I want to see some chains. There's the chains right there.
Yeah. There you go. But
we shouldn't conflate the failures in our education system, and there are many, quite frankly, right now. Yeah. We shouldn't conflate that with slavery. Okay, those are just failures that we have had ongoing. But people like Colin Kaepernick is going to see this as some kind of, oh my goodness, some good conspiracy to hold the black man in his place. That's Colin Kaepernick thinking.
Yeah. Well, let's jump to a related story, and this is something we talked about on a previous show, and it's also related to slavery as well. But we were trying to have this sort of a new segment where we call it Libertarian Corner. And it's just to really dig into an issue. And so we started digging into an issue and realized we didn't have enough time to get through the whole issue. And so we decided on our second shows now, we're going to try and run this issue so we can go long if need be. We can open up an overtime session after the normal half hour of the show. So, but anyways, the issue was
in the words of Tonto, what do you mean we, white man?
Tim is sort of trying to foreshadow or illustrate that in that last episode, he wasn't on the good end of the argument. We were trying to
okay, I'll stay here and take it like a man. Okay.
Hey, actually, I can probably argue a few points on your side too. But the issue was, we were talking about the Uyghurs in China, and the idea that Joe Biden had signed some restrictions, I guess, on trade to acknowledge the slave conditions that some of those people are being put into, and some of the abuse that they are being put into, and to say, hey, look, any product from that area of China are going to have restrictions on them. So the question really becomes, from a libertarian point, do we really need or want government to step in and regulate trade? Is there situations that should require that? Because for most libertarians, it's laissez-faire. You make the decision yourself whether or not to trade with somebody else. But what about in the case of some country, and they've got all their people in chains, and they're making products and they're selling to you at a bargain, and what appears to be a bargain, but they're at the cost of slave labor overseas. Is that okay then? And should a government put up restrictions against trade with that type of a place? And maybe we could pull the article up too as well, just so people can see. This was from the Wall Street Journal, and it says Walmart sparks public outcry in China over projects from the Xinjiang province. And so I guess that's where a lot of this abuse is happening. And it's kind of weird because there's people in China who are upset in the other direction that they don't have opportunities to get products in these Walmart stores that are in China from that area of the country because they're trying to follow Biden's prescriptions for stuff in the U.S. So,
and Jason, this is germane even here in the United States. I mean, in our history, that is most of the cotton that was being used in the United States was done in the South through slave labor. So it's germane here. It's a relevant question.
Okay, so I thought about it, Leon.
Okay,
are you ready?
I'm ready.
Jason, are you ready?
Yeah.
Gloria, are you ready? Okay, so what happened was, Leon slyly asked, so you don't think there's any exceptions to the government getting involved in restricting trade of some sort? And so I fell right into his trap and said, no exceptions whatsoever. So then Professor Leon said, well, what about slavery? And then I go, and then I basically tried to find a hole to crawl down into and hide, and a blanket to cover myself up with. But I think I've thought of something. Okay, if the whole premise was universal and governments did not get involved in trade, then it would be highly unlikely that a private enterprise could compete, because their government would basically be allowing them to interfere in the trade of a slave and their labor, being able to trade their labor for compensation. So therefore, if you had the whole premise that government never gets involved in restricting trade, that would have to apply also. Governments cannot allow slavery because that's restricting trade. They're allowing the restriction of trade, right? So if that were not allowed, there would be no such thing as slavery, because I'll tell you what, slavery didn't just stop because, slavery was just the best economic condition you could put people under. Slavery stopped in large part because it's morally reprehensible, but also because it's economically reprehensible. It goes against sound economics. You have to have the interaction of buyers and sellers in all facets to lift all boats up equally. That's how it works economically, and I think there's plenty of evidence out there. I just saw a recent article about this whole thing, explaining away the economic stupidity of slavery. So therefore, I think you may be able to have a more, Of course, you're not going to include slavery because the act of slavery itself is interference in the free market. Should I leave?
That's a good answer. That's a good answer to my That's a good answer. Even though you're long-winded and twisted yourself, I thought I would have had to help you out of the quandaries that you have made for yourself. But
I would say I twisted myself into a pretzel.
You surely did. Yeah. But I would say that if you look in one of our founding documents, which is the Declaration of Independence, it clearly said that we are entitled as human beings, as creatures of God. We are all entitled to that concept of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are the rights. These are our naturally given rights. The right to life, the right to liberty, and the right to pursue happiness. And anything that violates those principles, those God-given rights, those God-given principles, anything that violates it should not be allowed. So take slavery, for instance, okay? Slavery clearly violates the principle of liberty. It clearly does, okay? Not life, but certainly it violates the principle of liberty. So in that sense, I think government intervention will be justified in stopping such an action, in stopping the whole institution of slavery, whether it's in China or here in the United States, as we once did have here at home.
Yeah, hold on. I want to throw up the flag real quick here. I do have a few responses I wanted to give, but we could take this to an overtime. I'd like Tim to get a chance to do Good Guys with Guns before we have our Knucklehead noise patrol. But do you guys want to take this into an overtime? Because I wouldn't mind, making a few more comments on this.
Okay, we could go. That'd be good.
All I want to say is that Leon, if I was judging this debate, I would give the win to Leon. That last reply was excellent.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
It has been judged before concluding, kind of like the way Fauci operates, right?
But believe me, nobody wants to change the subject more than me. Oh, we're gonna do. I can whip out a good guy with gun.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. Are we gonna go? Good guys with guns. Then we're gonna go back to Leon obliterating Tim.
We
some more.
Jump into it just as much as we want and wrap up. So yeah, go ahead with Good Guys with Guns.
Okay, so this happened recently, January 11th, on a Tuesday morning at 3:30. St. Louis homeowner faced down not one, not two, but 5 home invaders. When one of the thugs started shooting, the homeowner fired back, and the home invaders ran for their lives, as shown on surveillance video. And they were all just booking out of there. At least one of the homeowner's rounds found its mark, unfortunately. In Sabria Furlow, the 23-year-old woman accompanied 4 males on the would-be heist. So unfortunately, she got killed. Now, this is unfortunate. Surveillance footage caught much of the scene, yes. Video also showed Mrs. Furlow's 4 fellow felons didn't stop to render aid. I like that, 4 fellow felons, after she was hit. In fact, they didn't even slow down or look back. Without anyone to provide aid, she died of her wounds. Police said basically they were attempting to commit a robbery or home invasion at this residence, 3:30 in the morning. Anyway, there you have it.
Why, Tim? Why would you characterize? I mean, is all this tragic when a life have to be taken?
That's why.
Because it's tragic of the taking of their life.
Yes, it's like, they're all running away. So this question about whether or not that's justifiable. Okay, so right away, because everybody's running. So I mean, and then this gal gets hit and gets killed.
Was she running away when she was shot?
I don't know the exact details, but I'm surmising that. Assuming that. Oh. There I go again. I'm pretzeling it.
Well, we don't know what was the exact circumstances of her being shot. But she put herself in a very bad situation. And even if she was running away, I don't know what she was going to do next. So I really can't have any sympathy for her getting shot. Even though losing her life, her young life, is a tragic event. But I can't have sympathy for her because she put herself in that position.
Okay.
Well, let's jump to our Knucklehead Noise Patrol. Give us another diversion from our rather deep argument on trade. Yes. But this takes us back to a recent knucklehead that we talked about, and that is our Supreme Court, our wise Latina on the Supreme Court, Justice Sotomayor. And so during this recent discussion that we had, where she was talking about the constitutionality of this OSHA mandate from Joe Biden, she said something that, didn't have to be tied to that particular thing, but she voiced kind of an ignorance of the Constitution that was just sort of really surprising from a Supreme Court justice. And what she said was, I'm not sure I understand the distinction why states would have the power to institute a mandate such as OSHA's, but the federal government wouldn't. And so, I mean, this goes right to the 10th Amendment, apparently, and that says that the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. So, I mean, there's a clear, I guess, path there for there to be these powers that a state would have that the federal government wouldn't, and it just seemed really odd to hear a Supreme Court justice sort of wondering out loud about things that are right there in that Constitution. So, you guys have any thoughts on this one?
I have to say that I'm particularly offended by this woman's statement. You know why? She and I share a birthday. I'm particularly offended that somebody born on my birthday could be such a jackass. Oh God, we'll have to block that out. Anyway, we'll have to beep that out. But on a serious note, the 10th Amendment, I believe, is one of the most abused amendments, because as the federal government keeps on grabbing more and more power and taking away our liberties, it is in clear and direct violation of the 10th Amendment, and they just keep on going at it. And we have Supreme Court justices, this one in particular right now, seem to be ignorant of what was the use and purpose of the 10th Amendment. And this is a real problem in our society, and this is a real problem for our freedom and our liberty.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's outrageous that she would, it belies her true feelings about the power of the federal government. Apparently, it's a monarchy or something. I mean, it's not a federalized, constitutionally based agreement between states that have sovereignty over themselves, and people also are sovereign people, and so it just puts the importance all into the federal government from a justice. I mean, that just shows where she's coming from. I mean, that's what she really wants. She wants centralized power, not this distributed power. And so I don't trust her. I don't like her. And I have to say that in the first show, I never once mentioned Tulsi Gabbard. So here's my time. I'm going to say hello, Tulsi.
Well, I tell you, we with that sweet note, we'll wrap up this particular regular time of the show. But now we're going to jump to our overtime and just wrap up any other points we had on that whole issue of government should it be involved in trade. Leon, you'd said that you used the Constitution, or not the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, I think it was.
Yes.
You said that it shouldn't be interfering with life, liberty, or just promoting that. I think that's what you were talking about. But it seemed to me once you say that there's something that the government's doing to interfere with life, liberty, and they're outside of our jurisdiction, I guess, should it be our government that decides when we should be able to, as individuals, make those decisions about who to trade with and who not to? I can just see there being a huge, camel's nose under the tent, to get in there and say, well, these people in this country have, elected not to have a minimum wage, and oh my gosh, somebody is working for, $2 an hour as an intern or something else, and so we can't possibly compete against that. So therefore, we shall have a trade barrier against those people to add a tariff for anything coming. You could kind of see where I guess there could be these incrementalizations. I guess where maybe a country could be, maybe there's some sort of thing that's not quite slave labor, but maybe governments in some way force people into work situations that's not quite as bad as chains. I guess, should we not be in a position as individuals to make those decisions to trade there or not?
Okay, let me just be clear about what your argument is. Are you arguing, say for instance, okay, look, at one time we had slavery here in the United States. Okay, we acknowledge that. Now, so that was something under the jurisdiction of the United States, and it continued for a long time. I don't think you're arguing about the government intervention in that case because it was under our jurisdiction. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I don't think so, because that'd be a clear contradiction to the government edict that you're not supposed to do that, and yet they're doing it. And I don't know, the government seemed to be all tied in a pretzel, as Tim was saying earlier, on its views on slavery, right? I mean, all men are free, and yet not so much, but it was still under the same jurisdiction. But I guess, what about in places in other countries? I mean, we just see these varying degrees of freedom around the world. Do we want our government deciding how free we should be to decide whether or not we want to trade with them based upon the impositions of freedom throughout the world? It could just be minor transgressions to major transgressions throughout the world.
I have to concede to you, Jason. That's a good point you're raising. Okay, and I'm like Tim on the last show. I don't have a good answer for that one, quite frankly, because you're right. The transgression is occurring outside our jurisdiction, and then the question then becomes, even if it is slave labor, and that is the allegation in China, that the Uyghurs are working under slave conditions, then should we be buying the products given the condition of its manufacture? Oh God, it's a good point. It's a good question. I am not sure if this is an individual decision that we should claim that as our right, or is that a condition for a central authority in terms of who should be allowed to bring manufactured products into the United States?
Well, let me flip it, the scenario, because this is one that's sort of common, that popped up on college campuses, but everybody loves to bring out the whipping boy of the Nike factory going into some, a third world country and opening a sweatshop. And so the idea that, maybe this Nike company comes in and maybe they have kids as young as 10 years old working in the factory. Maybe that's their best opportunity. So right away, it's hitting our our child labor laws right away are being impacted, because they couldn't do that here. And then suppose they're only paying them 40 cents an hour or 50 cents an hour to do that work. I guess now certainly you have a lot of kids on college campuses who would say, this is outrageous. We shouldn't buy these, Nike products unless LeBron James is endorsing them. I don't know, but I mean, we shouldn't, be buying these products because this is slave labor and all this. But the question comes down to is, was that person's free choice and best opportunity? And you can really ask that with first maybe remove the layer, was it a kid? Suppose it was an adult that took that job for 50 cents an hour. Okay, just to make it a simpler scenario. If that was their best free opportunity that Nike was offering, and it was better than all the other opportunities they had in that country, it's one thing for me as an individual to say, well, I still don't like it, I'm not going to buy it. But I get worried that those types of people are going to get into Joe Biden administration and say, hey, you can't buy those products because that's slave labor. And, and so then they're taking away that best opportunity by edict here. But then it gets a little more complicated, because now introduce the fact that that's a child at 10 years old. Is that okay? So I don't know. I mean, these are complicated things, but I guess I'm a little bit leery of letting Joe Biden decide all this for us.
And I think that I would have some serious pause about central government making these sort of decisions. But let's even add something to the scenario. What if it's an American company doing this in foreign lands, but it's an American company doing it?
Okay, so
that's what he meant by Nike.
Huh?
That's what he was talking about. American
Slave
company
labor.
Nike.
Just do it.
Yeah, But no,
Yeah,
my point is, it is true. Tim, it's true what you're saying. All right. But my point is though, is if it's an American company doing this in a foreign land, do we have any jurisdiction on that company?
Is that an inspirational like epiphany that just popped out?
No, that was an incoming phone call.
We thought you got a word from God that you were going to give us the right answer, Tim.
The clouds were parting.
Yes, the clouds are parted, yes. Yeah, but you know, Jason, you raise a good point. Okay, I'm not going to argue that point, but the question then still becomes though, what if it's an American company doing this? Do we have does the federal government and or any other authority within the United States have any sort of jurisdiction in order to say, well, no, you can't do this, or should we permit that?
Yeah, you know, because I mean, certainly, what if it was an American company that was going and grabbing women and forcing them into sex slavery or something in a place where maybe that was legal in some other place? You know, yeah, I mean, this does bring into play some good questions. But I guess it's I'm not always sure it's cut and dry. I mean, that one certainly seems egregious, because if it truly is sex slavery, they're just grabbing women and they have no choice and they're forcing them to do this. And if that's legal in a country, it sounds like a pretty terrible country. But it's wow. I mean, that would be a pretty straightforward one, I would think. But even then, I mean, you got the issue where it's a different jurisdiction, different laws. I don't know. I mean, it seemed like that would be the best case, I would think, for putting a tariff or some kind of a trade block against something. But of course, you can't really send that product overseas very easily either. So I don't know. But no, I take that back. I mean, think about the internet nowadays. They put a lot of this stuff overseas on video and then they stream it over here. Okay. Yeah. So, and that might be forced labor that you're watching if you happen to be watching that. Right. Sure. So that's, that's a real case then. Should that be illegal? Should the government be policing what comes over the internet in that case and cutting off your ability to watch that if it's known that was not voluntary labor? I guess.
Well, then but you're so right. That this thing, Tim, you're not saying anything, so I don't know how I'm cutting you off here. I hope I'm not.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring up Australia. What about a government that infringes on the freedoms of their population? Should we stop doing trade with Australia because of the tyranny that comes out of those shores?
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. But this issue surely is beyond complicated, I would say, because you always will come back to that central point. Where do you draw the lines? Okay, where do you draw the lines? At what point do you say? At what point do you say no? We cannot have this. But somebody will ask the question: these are human beings we are speaking about, and is there anything that we should recognize as the universal rights of human beings wherever they are? And that is another complicated question. That if we are seeing, like Jason brought up the question of sex slavery, if we are seeing that happening in some other country, or if it's not sex slavery, maybe it's forced labor, like that is occurring with the Uyghurs. Are there universal rights here that we have to consider in this whole debate? I don't know the answer to that. Okay, I don't know the answer to that, and I don't even know where we would draw that line, because if we're going to do anything about it, then it becomes a central government to do something about it, and then it violates every principle of ours, which we believe in free trade, we believe in the free enterprise system. And I believe in that universally, that the free enterprise system should be at work. But these issues that feed into that really complicate our beliefs and how we should articulate them.
Who's your pretzel daddy now?
You're picking up that surrender flag now. No, you know, one thing I would want to add though to this whole thing is just that I think this is clearly complicated, and maybe there are some scenarios where maybe the government should get in, but I think what we should really be after is liberty-oriented people, is to just have a lot less laws in general, so that when these really tough scenarios come out, we can actually have a reasoned, coherent debate and see what have our leaders debate this and consider this, instead of just, an edict. None of us are paying attention. It's just one of a million laws, and, just throw it on the heap of stuff that's already on our backs. I'd much rather, that we have a society where we're very careful before we put a law into place, really think about it. I think we'd be a lot better off.
Well, I think I stand on relatively firm ground when I say that the natural rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think I stand on firm grounds when I say that anything that violates those rights cannot be permitted and cannot be allowed. That is why I'm opposed to abortion, and that's why I would be opposed to slavery, because of those three simple principles. But that only applies within clearly, to me, the only clear answer comes when we are within the same jurisdiction, the United States in this particular case, where we could demand that things be changed because they violate those principles. When we get outside the United States, yes, Tim, you're right. I'm an apprentice. I am. I definitely am. When I'm outside the United States, I cannot give you a good answer. So yes, you can call me the pretzel daddy now.
It is funny, when you brought up too that one extra complicating thing, when you brought up abortion. I mean, consider in China, they literally were forcing an abortion policy on the whole country, and so I mean, should we have been, restricting trade with ourselves with them because that was a restriction on their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness? It just really gets murky when you get outside our border.
Yeah, of course it does. There's no doubt about it. Really. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well,
I don't know. I don't know if we have come to a universal resolution here. I think we have resolution within a jurisdiction, the United States, but I don't think we have anything outside the United States. I don't know what the answer is. Quite frankly, I'm not sure.
Well, my personal thought, I just mentioned it, but I just think maybe we should just be really, really cautious if we are going to put something on and really consider it as a country, not be something that we just do as a knee jerk. One of many things that gets slid into a bill that none of us know about until after it happened. Because quite frankly, I didn't even know about this restriction on trade with the Uyghurs, with China regarding the Uyghurs until after it happened. I mean, I really didn't even know that had been done. And that just shows you the complication of our government and everything that's being done, that you're having your rights, because it's your rights that are being restricted. If they're saying you can't, engage with those people overseas, and the fact that my rights were restricted and I didn't even know about it until later. So anyway.
So that which gets back to the poison of big government, and the lack of transparency in big government. That gets right back to the issue that they are doing things that are impacting us, impacting our rights, impacting our liberties, and we don't know about it until after the fact. That's a real problem. You're absolutely right.
Well, Tim, going once, going twice.
I shot my wad and it wasn't very good. So
well, on that optimistic note, we'll wrap up this overtime session. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you at the next one. Stay free.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.